Hi everyone. Today we're going to do the Unit 1 Lesson 1 notes on scientific knowledge. But before we get into that, I'm going to show you how to fill out our digital notes. In your Google Classroom, you'll see two files. The first one is this video, the Screencastify giving you the notes. And the second one is this document here. It's called Unit 1 Lesson 1 Scientific Knowledge, or it's going to be called 1.1 Vocab and Notes. Anytime we do notes, they're going to look very similar to this. You'll see vocab at the top. Sometimes there's going to be a lot of words, sometimes there's not. And then you'll see the notes down below. I organize my notes in outline format so that we can see the main topic and then subtopics underneath it. And then as you're watching the video and as we go through the notes, you can fill in those blanks as we go. So it's guided note style. When we're doing vocab, you'll see vocab at the top of any note slide. Vocab is always going to be done the same way throughout the entire year. This is an example from this lesson. So these are our words for Unit 1, Lesson 1. But it asks for three different things. First thing it asks for is a summary, which is basically just a definition or a description. Give me some important notes about this word and make sure it's in your own words. You may want to have more than just the definition, maybe like some important notes about that word or topic. But the important thing is here that you tell me, what does it mean? And do you understand it? So that's why I want it in your own words. I will tell you that the best place to get your information for your summary of your word is in the actual text of the book, in the actual section. So you would be looking in Unit 1, Lesson 1 of the book. Do not just rely on Google for your definitions because Google doesn't always provide you with the scientific version of that word. And then if you just look at the glossary of our textbook, which can be helpful, but the glossary is not going to give you the full picture. The glossary is not going to give you good diagrams or examples or explanations of the word, where that'll be helpful in the next section here. The next thing I ask for is an example or a sketch. This should be something that's relevant, that you can either take it from the book or think of it on your own, but it should be relevant to that term. Sometimes your textbook might have like a diagram or like some kind of a graphic organizer that you can use as an illustration. For this part, maybe take a screenshot of it if it's something small. So that might be helpful as well. And then the non-example. This is the part where students get stuck a little bit. Your non-example should be something relevant that does not fit in the same category as that word. And I'll give you examples of how to fill out these particular words throughout this lesson, just to kind of model it for you for the rest of the year for how we fill these out. Okay, so let's dive into Unit 1, Lesson 1. What is science? Okay, this is something that you guys have covered for years and years. You know, we know that science is discovering the natural world. Well, the natural sciences are divided into three areas. The first one is biology. Biology includes any kind of life science, cells, heredity, genes, all that stuff. Then we have geology, which is a lot of earth science, rocks, that kind of stuff. And then physics, and that includes chemistry too. We're going to be learning a little bit of each one of these. We'll start with physics, then move into geology, and then finish the year with biology this year. A lot of scientists' work overlaps more than one area. And that's really important because you may be a geologist, but a lot of physics is going to come into play in your career field. And you might be a biologist, but obviously the earth and the geology of your area, of where your organisms live, that's going to play a huge part into how life develops and how different organisms behave. So something else that's really important to know, and we'll rehash this throughout this year, is the difference between theory and law. Okay, so theories and laws in science is a little bit different from theory and law in everyday language. So in everyday language, a law is just a rule that you have to follow, and if you break it, you might get in trouble. Well, in science, a law is something that describes the way the world works. Like, they hold true all the time, no matter where you are in the universe. There is no breaking this rule. So scientific laws are true. It's a fact that describes how something works. Okay. A theory is a good explanation of why those things work. We call it a well-supported explanation of nature. Well, a theory, like I said, it's better than a theory in everyday language, because theory in everyday language means kind of like, oh, I've got a guess, or I've got a hunch, or I have an assumption I'm trying to make here. But a theory in science is a fact. It's going to describe how things work, why they work, and it's going to help us understand those laws of nature. Definitely, like I said, different from the word theory in everyday language. If you see the word theory and it's talking about a scientific concept, you can kind of equate those things to the word fact. Okay, so scientific theory is a scientific fact. It's well tested, well accepted among the scientific community, and has been proven over and over again in multiple different areas of science. So now that we've talked about law and theory, let's pause the notes, scroll up to the top, and fill out our vocab. Okay, so the first thing we talked about, I know they're out of order here, but the first thing we talked about was a law. A good summary of a law is it's a description of the way things work in the universe. Okay, and you can type this directly into your vocab at the top. You can copy my words this time. After this lesson, you will be expected to do the vocab on your own. I'm just showing you how to do it in this lesson as a model for you. But a good description of it, just kind of a summary of that definition, is it's description of how things work, right? With the way things work. Good examples of laws is, first of all, Boyle's law. If you did your pre-reading like you should have, Boyle's law just describes that in a gas, as you increase pressure, volume decreases. So like the volume of that amount of space that gas takes up is going to decrease if you apply more pressure. Okay, that's what Boyle's law is saying. It's not telling you necessarily how it works or what effect that has on anything. All that's saying is if I add pressure, then volume's going to decrease. It's just telling you what happens in nature. Newton's third law of motion, that's another example of a law. That's the one that says for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So forces act in balanced pairs. It's not telling me why that happens. It's just describing something that's going on in the universe. Non-examples, remember, have to be relevant. And I always like to think of them as something like, it's kind of similar, but you don't want to get it mixed up with this thing. Okay, so I don't want to get a law mixed up with a hypothesis. A hypothesis is something that we'll cover next lesson. But a hypothesis is more of talking about what we think the outcome of an experiment will be. It's not necessarily a law. A law is proven to be true anywhere in the universe. A hypothesis is more of an idea. And a law is also not a theory. A theory is a broader umbrella topic that laws can fit into. Okay, so let's talk about theory. Theories are thoroughly tested, well-supported explanations for why things work in nature, and they can help explain laws. So like I said on our last slide, they're thoroughly tested and well-supported across the scientific community, and they go a little bit deeper to explain why things work. It's not just telling me, okay, forces act in pairs. It's telling me why those forces act in pairs. You know, what's going on behind the forces that's making them act together. A good example, or two good examples of theories, are the kinetic theory. This explains Boyle's law. So this is just saying that gas particles move around a lot quicker, and the faster they move, the more room they take up. So the faster gas particles move, the more they're going to expand, the more space they're going to take up, so the more volume they're going to need. Germ theory is another theory that should be pretty well understood right now. Microorganisms can invade a host and can cause disease. This is a theory that we started to understand when we started to understand a little bit more like why people get sick. A theory is not a guess, and it's not a hunch. So these are great non-examples for theory. It's not some random idea, and it's also not a law. A theory is deeper than a law because it explains why things happen. So where do scientists get their evidence? Well, Evidence can come from field work, can also come from lab work, but field work is one really common way that scientists can get their evidence. Field work is cool because it allows biologists to actually, or scientists in general, to actually get their information from the actual natural environment of where their organism lives or where that object moves. And, it gets you to actually be able to study your topic in its natural environment. Well, laboratory work also has its place in science because you can control everything. You can control the conditions in a scientific lab. So chemists typically like to work in labs a lot of times. Physicists like to work in labs, so you can control the amount of air pressure or, how much contamination is going on. So there's oftentimes scientists will combine their field work and lab work to get their evidence. And something that's really, really important to remember about science is that scientific ideas do change. We learn new things all the time, and scientific ideas can change and can be adjusted as we learn new things. So like I said, finding new evidence is one way that scientific ideas can change. And just as an example, the theory of atoms has changed and developed over time. When we first started, we thought that atoms were like these solid balls of matter. And we thought that that was the smallest thing that existed on our planet. But then once we broke open the atom, we realized, wait a minute, there's all these tiny particles in here. There's electrons and neutrons and protons and even smaller particles than that called quarks. And that is something that we have come to know to be true now because we've studied a lot more. We have a lot more higher advanced technology that can help us study and get more information and more data. And that's something that we've had to adjust our old ideas. So now we know, okay, the atom isn't necessarily the smallest thing. We've got these subatomic, meaning smaller than an atom, subatomic particles that are even smaller than what we thought was possible. We also can get new scientific ideas by collaborating with other people and debating with other people. There's nothing that helps a scientist grow more than when they share their ideas with the scientific community and people ask questions and people force them to think outside of the box. That's a huge way that scientists work in the world. They'll study, they'll publish something, they'll put it out to the scientific community, and then the other scientists who are also experts in this field can ask questions and can make them think about the thing that they've been studying. And then that helps us come up with these laws and theories that explain what's going on in the world and how does all this stuff work. So here I have a video that I'm not going to show you on the Screencastify, but there is a link to it at the bottom of your notes. I definitely encourage you to watch this video. It's just a rehashing of what's the difference between theory and law. And the reason I won't show you videos on Screencastify is because they come out really splotchy. It's not going to be a great quality, but if you click that link in the bottom of your notes, you'll be able to watch it. And that's a good way to sum up our 1.1 notes. Your 1.1 notes should be completed by your due date. Make sure it's done in Google Classroom. Check the due date to make sure that you have it done in time and get it all submitted. All right, thank you.